Hello, and welcome to episode 15 of Attention Engineer. I'm Laura Kidd, a Bristol-based music producer, songwriter and independent solo artist making music as Penfriend. In this noisy world, the gift of someone's attention is priceless, so thank you for joining me on my mission to go deeper, past the headlines and the hearsay, to have the conversations I've always hoped for with some of the artists I admire the most. This podcast is supported by Arts Council England and the National Lottery, and powered by the Correspondence Club. More on that later. Hello there, and thanks so much for tuning in today. I've got another really interesting conversation to share with you, and it almost feels redundant to describe it as honest because every single person I've recorded for this podcast has been so open from the get-go, whether I'd met them before or not. I hope you do get a chance to listen to some of the others, but I can't really direct you towards any particular favourites because I honestly don't have any. That's a good sign, I think, and though occasionally I pessimistically wonder when the first absolute dud conversation is going to happen, I'm pleased to say it hasn't happened yet. I might be setting myself up for a fall there, but we'll see, won't we? Anyway, I hope that wherever you are in the world, and come to think of it, whenever you are, who knows how long this series will be available on the internet?
Hello, future humans.
Anyway, yes, wherever you are and whatever you've been up to, I hope you're doing okay. I'm doing okay. I've actually been spending quite a lot of time in the past week indulging a trip down memory lane because Tuesday the 1st of September is the 10th anniversary of the release of my debut album Disarm, which was the first of 5 records I put out under the name She Makes War before I ended that project last year. 10 years. Holy shit. That is a chunk of time, isn't it? I think that's something worth celebrating, so I've put together a brand new collection of demos and rarities that tell the story of my journey towards creating Disarm. I've never shared any of these before, and when I was digging through my overstuffed hard drive, I found 4 songs I'd completely forgotten about. So it's quite the treasure trove of stuff really, and if you're interested in finding out how to get a copy, just go to penfriend.rocks and sign up to the mailing list. On the actual anniversary next Wednesday the 1st of September, I'm also going to be doing an online gig to celebrate. It's free and open to everyone, so if you'd like to get an invitation, just go and sign up to the mailing list at penfriend.rocks, and I'll even send you 2 free songs to welcome you. Now to today's guest. Estella Adeyeri is a performing musician and multi-instrumentalist. She plays bass guitar in black feminist punk band Big Joanie and lead guitar in anarcho-pop punk outfit Charmpit. She's toured extensively and has shared stages with artists such as Sleater-Kinney, Bikini Kill and Gossip. Estella is a member of the organising team behind Decolonise Fest, an annual London-based music festival run by punks of colour for punks of colour. She's also a board member of the Good Night Out campaign, which seeks to create safer nightlife spaces. She's volunteered with Girls Rock London since 2017 as a band coach, instrument tutor and year-round organiser. Here we go. For anyone listening who might not know you, please could you introduce yourself to the listeners of Attention Engineer?
Hi, I'm Estella Adeyeri. I'm a musician. At the moment, I play in the bands Big Joanie and Charmpit, but I've played in quite a few others over the past couple of years as well. I do a lot of kind of different volunteering things. So I'm a volunteer with Girls Rock London. So Girls Rock London are a music charity, and we kind of run like music camps for young women, either non-binary youth or trans youth. So we've had to adapt this summer, so that's taken up quite a lot of my last few months, kind of working out how we're going to do Girls Rock not at camp. Also, I'm a volunteer with Decolonized Fest, which is a music festival that's run by punks of colour for punks of colour. Usually we would have had a festival this summer, but again, Corona has interrupted, so we're going to be pursuing an online festival this September, so keep an eye out for that. I'm also on the board for the Good Night Out campaign, which looks at trying to create safer nightlife spaces. And yeah, so it's worth kind of following them as well to look at a lot of the work they're doing and yeah, kind of combating the way nightlife has often been hostile to, again, either marginalised people, women, and also the kind of accessibility issues that a lot of venues haven't bothered to address in the past, trying to make that conversation an absolutely pertinent one.
Yeah. So what came first in your life? Was it activism or music?
I guess music, because that was always like present. Like I played my first instrument when I was 4, and I got sent to like piano lessons and stuff. And my parents, well, they played instruments, but not so much like as I was growing up, kind of like before I came along. I think they were a bit more active in the music side, but my dad would always have like tons of records and always be playing those and stuff. So music was kind of, present from the get-go, really. And I guess that activism followed quite naturally. Like, I guess if you're a woman like playing guitar, at some point you're probably going to be introduced to Riot Girl and understand why that happened. So yeah, it was just kind of natural. And also when I went to uni, that was where I kind of first came into contact with like texts by Black feminists and that whole side of feminism that I hadn't explored before, really. Like there was just like loads of like bell hooks in my uni library and stuff, and I was like, nobody told me about this. So yeah, kind of went down that rabbit hole. And yeah, I remember they also had a really big book on like Riot Girl in my library as well. So I had like a good time rifling through that.
It sounds like a great library.
Yeah, it was. I feel like I didn't really, it took a couple of weeks to get there in my first year. Like, I remember just a few weeks of being like, oh, I should be reading these key texts and I definitely should have been here. But yeah, when I actually explored it, like, there was a lot of like interesting stuff that you could read on your own that wasn't, just walls. So that was nice.
Well, that's important, isn't it? Like finding the stuff that's not on the course. I didn't do a degree. What degree did you do?
Politics and philosophy.
Wow, that sounds really, really interesting. So there must have been loads of reading it already.
Yeah.
So to find stuff outside of that is like a big choice to make.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When I started coming across things that really lit me up, I kind of wanted to scream at the world, why didn't you tell me about this earlier? So the Riot Girl thing was big for me because I read a book called, what was it called? I read a book called Never Mind the Bollocks by Amy Raphael when I was a teenager. And I hadn't heard of any of these people and I hadn't heard of Riot Girl. It hadn't got to me, it really wasn't that accessible, maybe even in this country, but certainly not in the sort of, I don't know, at school where I was. I didn't hear any of it. And so just reading about these people and the different ways they express themselves and the different ways they talked about themselves. And of course they do, because all women are different people. We're all different people with different viewpoints and stuff. And I didn't think anything different, but I hadn't read all of those inspiring stories. So that was really big for me, really, really big. And then I read The Female Eunuch as well around the same time, and a book called The Women's Room by Marilyn French. And it was like, pow, pow, in my brain, just all of these like doors opening up.
Exactly.
Germaine Greer has become a more problematic character in recent times, so I'm not going to go into that. But that book certainly was like a big thing for me. Books for me were always the gateway to that, like freedom of the mind and exploring and stuff. Do you still read a lot now?
Not as much as I would like to, but I do feel like as well, like back in the day, like I spent a lot of time at the library, and my local library did have CDs as well. And so it was kind of at the time when like, the ability to like burn a CD on your home computer was like a big deal. So
I remember.
and like, my library would just have like loads of cool stuff in there that I hadn't really heard. Like I remember they had like the Be Your Own Pet album and
I love them.
Sleater-Kinney CD, and that's where I first got exposed to those bands, just kind of through like rifling through what was there and being like, oh, maybe I've seen that band mentioned in a music magazine or something, but I hadn't really either got like the money or the access to those like records myself. And that was really cool. I don't know if libraries still do that. And I know obviously a lot of libraries are underfunded, or probably since I was younger. But yeah, that was just like a really cool way to get hold of like new music from all over the place, really.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm making this up, but I had the same experience because, my local library in Bury St Edmunds had this amazing, or to me, amazing range of stuff, and you could obviously just check it out with your library card. And so it's kind of like going into a record shop in the sense that a record shop is a bit more curated. You can rifle through things, like you're saying. You can find stuff. You can pick stuff because the cover is appealing to you.
Yeah.
And then you could just check it out for free and listen. So that's how I discovered Belly. That's how I started listening to Radiohead. And of course, it's not like they had such a niche music collection there. Those two bands were really popular, but still I hadn't heard them, and so that was a massive thing for me.
It's like a gateway kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's a very different thing as well to the visceral thing of finding something, picking it up, turning it over. And I'm not slamming digital stuff. I love digital stuff. I love the internet, a lot of the internet, but it's just different, don't you think?
Yeah.
Picking something up because the cover looks brilliant. It's like when you pick a book off a shelf. I don't know, it's the same thing for me. It's really cool to hear that's one of the ways you found stuff. Who were the big bands for you when you were growing up?
I think definitely like Yeah Yeahs was like a big like a big deal when I discovered them. Obviously Karen O, like the coolest person, one of the coolest people ever. The whole like kind of the performativity, like I've seen them live and stuff, and like the kind of spectacle of it is awesome. And like I love the way she can go from like kind of screaming to like singing something really beautiful like Maps or something. And obviously like Nick Zinner as a guitarist as well was like just seeing the way he played and stuff and trying to emulate that. I remember that, trying to do like little like tremolo picking and stuff, and like wasn't quite as good as him, but they were definitely a big impact. And also I think I first saw like Paramore when I was probably like 14 or 15, because there was this festival, like Give It a Name festival. I've spoken to like one other person who's been to one of these, but it's like this big, I want to just say like emo pop punk festival. And the year I went, they were like, I think it was like maybe one of their first times in the UK, and they were on the second stage, which was just like a corner of the main stage. But I just remember like being that age and being like, who is this like teenage girl in an emo band? Like again, it was like I hadn't really seen people who I could relate to like in these bands. It always seemed very like male dominated, and obviously I loved the music at the time, but it was cool to be like, oh no, we're like, okay, so young women can also make this music.
That's so powerful, isn't it? To have a role model of any kind.
Yeah.
Any way of imagining yourself in that situation. I find that so powerful.
Yeah. And obviously that band's evolved a lot over time, but it's just like cool to have a band that you've kind of like grown up with and seen, just kind of seeing how that's affected them as well. And obviously there's been like the Hayley Williams solo album this year and stuff. And so it's quite interesting for me to see that journey and someone who's like, I think she's maybe like a year or two older than me. So but those are my like teen heavyweights.
And have you heard the latest Karen O stuff she's been doing with Danger Mouse? There's an album.
I've heard a little of it. Yeah.
So beautiful, so good. I just happened across it recently.
Yeah, I was saying I've really enjoyed her kind of lockdown Instagram performances, which look like they're in a cupboard at her house. So
I didn't know about those.
It's great. So I think one of her kids kind of like always opens, they'll open the door when she's just in there. She did like Phenomena with Nick just like on a laptop, and you can kind of just see him there like shedding, and she's like really performing and stuff. And then at the end, this kid just like slams the door. It's like, goodbye. It's great. I love it.
Well, I've got a lot to catch up on. There's been so much going on, though, over the past few months. It's lovely to see how people's creativity has just sort of, I suppose, blossomed in these times.
Yeah.
They're terrible times for many people, and that we can't downplay that at all. But it's just one of those things. I think if we'd all stopped, was it 4 or 5 months ago, if we'd all just stopped and waited, what would we be doing now? Just still waiting. So it's good to see some people have managed to make some things happen.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the various festivals and things you're involved in, trying to do stuff online. How's that working? Because that's really hard.
It's really like I didn't expect to come up against like such difficulty organising online. Like there really is something like specific to just being able to meet like your core team in person and hash out what's going on, because obviously you might miss certain context cues when you're trying to organise online. Obviously we don't all have like necessarily like the best internet connections and things like that, so even like something as small and annoying as that can kind of hold things up. And a lot of people have described like a Zoom fatigue as well, which I think is fair enough. Like not everyone wants to be glued to their screens in a way that maybe they didn't have to be before this situation. So like on the one hand, it's opened up a lot of opportunities for kind of expanding our ideas of what we do. For example, like in the past, obviously Decolonized Fest, it used to take place at DIY Space for London. And so it would be dependent on artists being able to obviously come to London to perform, us being able to afford to pay them the decent amount that they deserve for making that journey from wherever they've come from. And same with people who would do workshops for the festival as well. Whereas now we can think of our festival as existing beyond borders, because now that it can take place online, we can have guests from literally anywhere in the world. And so we're speaking to artists outside of the UK. We're really excited about that opportunity opening up. And I think the same for Girls What London actually as well. So we're doing like a summer programme that's involved some online activities and also mailing out physical kind of music resources to young people. In the end, we actually fundraised so we could have 100 young people attend our summer programme, whereas if it was an in-person music camp, we'd only be able to have 25 people at camp, just literally through the amount of space we're restricted to and things like that. So, and we've also been able to work with young people outside of London. We've had requests from people like as far as Hull and things like that, which is the first time we've actually kind of undertaken like a national thing rather than just London specific. And that's been really great actually, to be able to reach young people who might need us beyond like the city. So yeah.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, I know there's obviously the drawbacks to that as well. So I was part of the Ladies Rock London thing in 2007. I was one of the bass tutors, or maybe I was the only bass tutor, and I was doing all that kind of demystifying your gear kind of stuff. And I see that you've been doing those as well, just explaining to people, you plug it in here, this is it. It's not rocket science. Someone will make you feel bad for not knowing it, but it doesn't mean that they're right, all that kind of stuff. I love that, because that's so powerful for people who don't know. I don't think it's completely gender specific either, because there'll be a lot of boys who wouldn't know, but it's very different for girls, I think. So to have that space where no one feels judged, everyone just sort of goes, well, we don't know, we'll figure it out. That was really great. I loved being part of that.
Definitely. And one of my early lockdown projects when I was still full of beans was I was lent an analog synth, the Moog Sub Fatty, by like a friend who's working with a company who like would usually hire out like music gear if gigs were happening. So obviously they're like, well, we've got to go into lockdown. All this gear is just going to be sitting here. Would people be interested in like maybe hiring it for cheap or borrowing it, so that people actually like can maybe like take that time to learn a new instrument if, you know, like other things have been derailed through lockdown and stuff. And I thought it was quite a nice way for them to try and like let people have a positive like opportunity in what was unfolding at the time to be like quite a difficult and a time that we didn't really know what was going on. I think like at the start of March, I just like felt like I just didn't really know happening for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So they dropped off this like surprisingly quite heavy actually synth at my house, and I spent like 2 weeks learning how to use it, and I'd just post on like Instagram like my daily kind of progress and things that I'd learned and shared with people. So I think the beginning is literally like me being really excited to get it, and then the realization that I couldn't just plug it in and go. I was like, oh, actually I have to like read the manual and like learn about these wave shapes and what they mean, and to understand like what I could do and to actually unlock what it could do. And I really enjoyed that, and it was nice to get feedback from other people who were like, oh yeah, I've been interested in this but I just didn't really understand it, or like who appreciated it being explained in a simple way. And like I got things wrong along the way as well, because like it was new to me. And I think it's good to see that like it's fine to get things wrong, or like
of course
know what you're doing all the time, or not be like the biggest expert in your instrument or whatever.
I don't know where that comes from, but I've carried that with me my whole life as well. The idea that, like, even in conversation up until fairly recently, maybe 5-10 years ago, if I didn't know what someone was talking about, I'd just sort of go, and I'd file it away in my head so I could go and sort of find out later, but kind of pretending I knew what they were talking about. Whereas now I would just go, oh, I don't know about that. Can you tell me?
Yeah.
Because of course I don't know about everything in the whole world. And of course I'm not an expert in everything in the whole world, because I'm one person and I've only lived my experience, and I'm always trying to learn, and I read all the time and I talk to people, but I don't know everything. And so it's like this weird bravado but where's it coming from? Because I think most people seem to have it. Maybe it's just like a deeply held human trait. We must act like we know what we're doing at all times, because if you show a crack in that armour, then someone's going to get you. But especially in music, I think going, I don't know, let's have a go. Like, let's play with stuff. I don't know very much about stuff, but I know how to come up with melodies and layer things up. I know how to record myself well enough so I can send it to a mix engineer who does a brilliant job to finish it off for me and stuff like that. But honestly, that's taken me so long to get to that point where it wasn't like, oh, but I can't do it perfectly and someone's going to know, you know?
Exactly.
Have you suffered with that as well with music? Because it sounds like you're not in that place, but has that been a process?
Yeah, I think it definitely took me a while to get to a place where I felt like, yeah, it's okay to have to ask questions, or not be expected to have all of the answers immediately. And yeah, it's so strange that we hold this idea when naturally, if you are a musician, at some point you didn't know how to play that instrument that you're playing, like literally. Yeah. So we all start kind of at the same place. So I think the things that have helped along the way were probably like starting off in like more DIY music scenes where people weren't necessarily like super judgmental, or like I had supportive friends in the music scene that I was in. So like I started playing in bands when I still lived in York, which is where I went to uni, but I'm actually from London. And yeah, that's the only city I've lived in outside of London actually. But so I was working in a music venue there called Fibbers. Shout out to anyone who remembers it on the Stone Bow. Great times, great venue. And that was how I met people in like my local music scene. And I already like played guitar and stuff, but I hadn't really found people at uni who wanted to like play with me and stuff. And like I remember there was like a band society, but they just seemed to really like go to the pub. I don't really remember anything like good happening with bands.
Let's celebrate the gig before we do it.
Yeah,
musicians.
We went to like one gig or something in Freshers Week, and then I was like, but yeah, so being in an actual music venue was really great because like obviously I got to see shows for free and stuff, and yeah, like chat to other people who were playing in York and stuff. So joined a band there, and everyone in that band was kind of very, like willing to accept the fact that it was my first kind of, in quotes, proper band, and that, you know, I hadn't really like played many gigs really, or like I hadn't sung in a band before then, and I also didn't think that I was that good at guitar, to be honest. And I'd say that's like probably an insecurity that has been quite difficult to shake and has taken a long time to get over because when I was in my first band, Junk, like the other two guys in the band seemed like both really quite accomplished musicians. They'd like played in a band or in bands before and had played like big festivals and stuff, and I didn't have that. So I kind of felt like, oh, well, like they know more than me, even though I don't think they ever put that on me. It was something that I felt myself. I do feel like when I started playing in those bands, like the music community in New York was like really supportive. Like we had our first gig like the week after the band started. Like that was kind of what persuaded us to get writing some songs. Was our friend was like, oh, you should like open my gig, and we were like, oh, we don't have like any songs, and he was like, oh, like just play for like 10 minutes or whatever. So we did that. And then like when I wanted to play drums, like people in town lent me loads of gear or like gave me like breakables to get going and stuff like that they didn't use anymore, and were very like just like encouraging and not judgmental. And I think maybe it was like later on being in other kind of music spaces outside of that bubble where I already know everyone, where I came across more attitudes of like being expected to know certain terminology, or I guess like for me, like sound is a big thing, like sound engineering. So like if you've never been to a sound check, why would you know what you're supposed to do? Like one of the things we do in Girls Rock is because the camp, for anybody who doesn't know, like our music camps that we run for young people, they start on a Monday, end on a Saturday, and young people might come and have never played an instrument before, but we'll put them in a band, we'll give them some tutoring, some songwriting sessions, they'll go off and write songs together in their own bands, and they'll play the gig on the Saturday to like the volunteers and to their parents. And they always make really amazing music with actually very little creative input from us. It's literally like we give them the tools, but everything that they do is through them. But we always do an intro to sound check as well, so that people can know like what to ask a sound engineer, or just like how to articulate it sometimes is the thing, like if nobody's told you. And and obviously like it's quite a heavily like male dominated sphere, sound engineering, I've found, although since I've like joined groups where there's like more women and like non-binary people doing it and stuff, like the Sound Girls group is one example on Facebook. It's more coming into contact with people reacting in a way of being like, why don't you know this? Has been the main.
I'd say that's probably one of the worst areas for it. And there are lots of wonderful sound engineers. And if you're listening, you're probably a really good one. And we're not talking about you. But I don't know if it's to do with being really stressed and like short on time, or doing it too much. So they've just seen too many bands, or I don't know what it is. But oh my God, it's a trial. I go through it a lot, and I've put several albums out, and it's not like I turn up at a venue going, well, I've put lots of albums out, treat me like I'm special, but I am a professional, I know what I'm doing. And still people are incredibly rude and incredibly condescending and weird. And then often when I've played the gig, the sound person will come up afterwards and be like, oh, I really enjoyed that. And I kind of want to go, well, I didn't, because you made my life hell for like 45 minutes beforehand for no good reason. So and especially then, if you don't know, if you haven't done that before, that could put you off for life, don't you think? It could put you off gigging forever.
Definitely.
They have a responsibility, I think, to be more welcoming. And I don't really understand what the good reasons are. And I suppose I'm talking about sound engineers in smaller venues. And there are some great ones. And honestly, I think I've come across maybe 5 women or non-binary sound engineers in my life. And I've been touring for a long time.
Like there's just so many things there really that I could like go on about, try and keep it succinct. But like first of all, I'd say, so usually in I think the late May bank holiday, Girls Rock London would do an adult rock camp as well. And so again, that's for cis women or trans people or non-binary people to attend. So it's only cis men who can't come to our camps. So I I won't apologise for it. Like, you've got plenty.
Well, they have everywhere else.
Like, they can come to the gig though and like support.
Yeah.
That's cool. There's no upper age limit on the adult rock camp, and the amount of older women who had been, or like older attendees who had been put off by experiences in the past, and is just like being made to feel unwelcome, or that it was that playing in a band was something they couldn't or shouldn't be doing.
It's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and like, just like women in their 50s, I remember being like, oh, if I don't do this now, then I'll never do it. And it's been my dream for 20, 30 years. And that's really unfair. And I think for me, so when like I came back to London in 2015, DIY Space for London, RIP, because the first iteration is now gone. But DIY Space for London was just opening in South London, and they had, I think they put on Facebook or something that they had these different collectives, and if you joined the Sound Workers Collective, you could learn to do sound engineering by just shadowing someone and essentially like learn sound engineering for free and stuff, like on the kind of like as gigs were happening. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, it's something I'd love to know more about, because I felt like if I knew how to do it, then when I come to sound check at my own gigs, I could have that language to articulate what I need, or be able to stand up for myself if I think they were saying something that's wrong.
I usually get told that my gear's broken. And I'm like, every night?
Yeah, they definitely had that on one of our last tours before lockdown, like a sound engineer who like had been drinking on the job as well, which is like fine if that's what you want to do.
So pro.
But, like, like it didn't seem that professional. They were like visibly like drunk, and their reason for the vocals sounding shit was that our mics were broken, and we were like, the mics we've been using the whole week, they're actually like quite new because they've been given to us at South by Southwest by this like and by Electronic Voice, and great microphone, so shout out to them if they want to come calling. But like, just ridiculous things like that.
Been there, yeah.
I just found it really useful to learn how to do it myself. And also just like, again, it's like, why, you kind of realize like, why am I going to gigs and the women's vocals sound shit? And it's like, there's no reason for it if you know what you're doing. So is it just laziness, or like, what's the deal? So
it's pretty weird.
So being able to like be in control, and like, especially if there were shows at DIY Space, for example, like with Decolonized Fest being held there, so sometimes I would do sound for those shows, and I'd know that the artists are getting treated how they should be at sound check, and specifically I think with it being a POC festival as well, or POC 1 festival, there's like a comfort to knowing that the person on the desk is like a person of colour as well. So for me that was part of it, and I'm really grateful to DIY Space for them being very intentional when they started out and saying that we want to diversify like this area. We know that sound engineering is male dominated, and we want to try and address that and encourage people who maybe aren't straight white men to come and learn with us, and try and make that an environment where you feel welcome and encouraged to learn and encouraged to ask questions. So I think just making those spaces is so important, and I think that's why I've been drawn to things like Girls Rock that will facilitate that. And there was also first timers at DIY Space, which is really great at encouraging, again, like underrepresented people to either start bands or get into the things around it, like promoting gigs or sound engineering, stuff like that. It really helps in like finding your community as well, and finding people who think similarly to you. Like, I guess people who can look around and be like, oh, maybe this field shouldn't all be one type of person.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last thing I did want to say about like, yeah, sound engineers as well is I think it would be great if they could approach each person without assumptions, because it's like you can't tell by looking if that person is super experienced or if they've only played a handful of shows. And I think there should be like another thing I really appreciated at DIY spaces, sound engineers would hold space for that to perhaps be a new experience for you.
Yeah.
Maybe like we should be kind of normalizing that, you know, I think especially in small venues, like I don't know how else people are expected to get experience. Like obviously like the first few shows I played, I didn't really know. So it was a while before I played a gig with monitors, and I was like, I didn't realize you're supposed to be able to hear yourself singing.
Yeah, same.
It felt really luxurious.
It's like learning to drive in the rain, I always say. So it's like if you didn't know that you needed that thing, if you didn't like get a good monitor mix. I've done so many hundreds of gigs where like the mix was dreadful. So when you get a good one, it's just like, whoa, this feels almost too easy. There's something wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think, like if you seem like approachable and open to questions, it really pays off. And I think it's another thing I really value about first timers, because when I was learning at DIY Space, like one of my really pivotal like sound shifts when I was learning was first timers, because there were a ton of bands, they all had like wildly different setups, and the whole point of first timers is that everyone's playing their gig for the first time. So it's actually like quite important that you know how to communicate with someone who's having this stage experience for the first time, is probably very nervous and doesn't know all these like little technical terms and jargon that exist in sound, but to still be able to help them set up. I think also make them feel comfortable on the stage and then also make sure it sounds good. I think that's actually like possibly more of a skill than like working with an artist who does that like day in, day out for like 20 years, whatever, who already knows what they want and stuff. Yeah, I think that's partly why when I would then approach like leading a shift, I wouldn't make any assumptions about like how much knowledge this person has, or like it would never cross my mind to speak down to someone who doesn't have the same level of knowledge that I have, because what's that going to achieve? Nothing. So
what's the worst thing that's happened to you, like the worst experience you've had as a musician?
Oh, actually probably when our van broke down on the way to like on kind of like our first European tour, and we hadn't even like got out of the UK. We were supporting Parquet Courts. So that's like probably like our first quite big support tour, because they were playing quite big venues. Yeah, barely out of South London. The van broke down for the first time. Then we got it repaired, got back on the road. It broke down like on the motorway, and it just rolled to a stop. Like I think like the engine cut out. So we're like in like a lane of moving traffic, unable to kind of show what's happening. Just slowly coming to a halt. We were like,
that's so terrifying.
Yeah, it's really scary. And I think he like just managed to like get it onto like a hard shoulder. But yeah, long story short, just like hours at the side of the motorway, van was like written off. We saw it get towed away, but we were just like, we don't like have the money to like cope with, first of all, like everything that was going on, because it's like a big expense. We were like, that's just going to wipe out like anything we might even hope to have made from the tour, when we were probably only really going to break even anyway if we were lucky. So yeah, just that feeling of being like, like this is our first like big break and maybe we won't make it. Like I remember that being like a really like sad time, but I mean we did have a happy ending because we had like a GoFundMe, and we were like, we can't afford this, but we would quite like to carry on the tour.
People really rallied for you, didn't they?
Yeah, it was really nice. Like we didn't expect that much support as well.
But people are so generous though.
Yeah, and like I feel like people have always been really supportive of us, like people who've liked the band and stuff. A lot of people will like go out of their way to like either like leave nice comments, or when we speak to people at shows, we always have really great conversations and stuff, and really value like the audience that bothers to come and see us or takes the time to like send us a message or an email. And yeah, I'm still always like quite surprised that even that we made the gig, to be honest, because we got there like 45 minutes before stage time. So like we'd missed sound check, like everything. And we're like running in. It was like a really amazing show, I think, because we had so much adrenaline.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it was hard. So I'd say that's probably like, that was like the worst feeling moment I think I've had. And then otherwise, probably just like annoying things that have happened. Yeah, at the end of last year, we'd like played a festival and like in Europe, and someone from the festival was like driving us. He had this conversation in the car with us where he basically explained how he had like assumed we were just going to be like some shit band, but were surprised, like pleasantly surprised that we weren't. We were just like, this isn't a compliment. And also like,
you're like, thanks, dude.
Yeah, I felt like,
thank you so much.
In the car with you. Yeah. So it was really awkward. But like, and I feel really good that Shadeen like made it quite clear that she was quite offended because she was in the front seat as well. But he seemed really surprised by her response and then embarrassed. But it was just like, well, what did you think was going to happen? So yeah, just like, it's annoying. That kind of similar to that thing you said of like, once you defy the expectation that you're going to be shit, then suddenly they're like, oh, I quite enjoyed that actually. Like, why did you think you wouldn't enjoy it?
Yeah.
We are headlining the second day of that festival as well. So it's kind of like, well, like that festival is not just going to bring us over if they don't think we're going to be any good. So yeah, it's a bit annoying.
Just a bit. I don't know. It depends what kind of mood I'm in as to whether I find it amusingly annoying or like I spit fire.
Yeah.
Like it's unbelievably frustrating to be judged on, well, an appearance essentially.
Yeah.
Or a perception of, for me, gender. It's obviously gender, and for you, intersectional. You know.
Yeah.
There's racism. There's sexism. At this point, do you mind which one it is? Like, is it equally annoying? How does that feel? Yeah,
it's like so there's like the term like misogynoir, which like speaks about this specific intersection of like racism and sexism that Black women experience.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to just be like, even just traveling as, obviously we don't get to do it anymore, but traveling as a band of like
fingers crossed we will see.
Yeah, of 3 Black women, and just in that, people being like very surprised or looking like confused about what's like, what is this?
Oh my.
Just like, yeah, it's really weird. And I think also like some of it, I think, is partly as well that we're sometimes presumed to be younger than we are as well, which often people think gives them license to be quite condescending. So we just have like good skincare routines. We can't help that. So.
I get that all the time. So for me, I'm trying to work out sometimes, is it because they assume I'm rubbish because I'm female, or they assume I'm rubbish because they think I'm 10 years younger than I actually am because I've got good skin?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no use me wasting my energy on either of those questions. I just have to do my show and ignore it to some extent. But it can actually block you from doing your thing. And that's when it really pisses me off. Have you had instances where it's actually affected the show or blocked you from doing what you want to do?
There was one show where, and I hadn't picked up on it at first, I think it was Shadeen who noticed it during the set, but they just like added loads of delay to our vocals in a kind of almost like more like what you'd get in sort of like a dub genre, like that kind of thing, which obviously we hadn't asked for, like to the point it like sounded like bad because that's not our sound. And Shadeen had to literally say like mid-set, like, can you stop doing that? Because like she wasn't sure if they'd expected like us to sound a certain way because of the way we looked. So they'd be like, oh, they must want this like dub sound, or like what was going on. Because also the sound check, we'd had a sound check where we hadn't asked for that. Yeah, so like again, I guess that's someone placing their own assumptions of what our band would sound like. And I think especially as a band of a stand-up drummer as well, and like the amount of annoying and condescending comments we get because of that, where like it's literally she's just playing the drums standing up, like it's not that hard to tech for or whatever.
It's not because she doesn't know you can sit down.
Yeah.
She's obviously decided to do that for a reason.
We've had engineers be like, oh, is that because it's like the easier way or whatever? It's like, no.
Oh,
as if like men haven't played drums in that way. Like Shadeen's always been like, I play drums like that because I like the Jesus and Mary chain and I wanted to be in a band like that. And also she's really good at pointing out that it was either like slaves or like royal blood. I don't really listen to either, so I might not be specific in that. But like there was one of those bands who their drummer would play like standing up with like an overturned bass drum, and people would be like, oh, that's so like primal and like warm. And then when like it's us, it's always like it's often described as like some sort of lack, or like it doesn't fill out as much as like a full hit,
right?
And it's like, I don't want a drummer who's doing like 8 million fills that the song doesn't need every like 10 seconds, because like I've seen those bands and that like I don't think it sounds good. And also it's like so ridiculous to think that that drum setup doesn't fill out our sound when that is the sound.
Well, you've made the choice.
Yeah. And if you're good at like, or if you understand that that's the sound, like we've played stages where that's sounded like massive.
Yeah.
Like whenever we've played, again, like just purely humble brag, but like so we played at like Brixton Academy and like not one person said we didn't fill out the sound, and that's
of course not.
So
this is the bit where I like to stop and take a moment to appreciate the wonderful people who power everything I do. Hello and thank you, correspondents. It really is a choice to pay for music these days, and I'm so grateful to the people who are able and willing to support this podcast and my upcoming album. Last week I sent out the first Correspondence Club bundle with the zine, 5-track CD, postcard and a bookmark, and it's been lovely seeing them show up all around the world. Thanks for sharing your photos with me. If you're interested in joining us and receiving some really lovely member perks, you can find out more at penfriend.rocks. And remember, absolutely everyone can get 2 free songs. Right, back to my chat with Estella Adeyeri. Sisters, the album that came out in 2018, had amazing press, Pitchfork, KEXP sessions, stuff like that. How did that feel?
Yeah, we didn't expect it. We didn't really like know, obviously, what to expect, because that was the first album we'd recorded. It was the first bit of recording I'd done with Big Joanie. We were just excited to have it out. Like, again, we'd recorded the album, like got the album recorded ourselves. So we'd like saved up all our merch money and stuff over time, and any gig money we'd had that had just been like piling up. And we ended up recording with Margot Broom, who's a producer. Like even that whole experience is so new. We learned so much from her about like how recording works. And she really introduced us to the idea that like, oh, your album doesn't have to sound exactly how you sound live on stage, because we'd always just kind of been like, okay, well, this is how we play it in practice, so then we'll go to the studio and do that, obviously. And she was like, well, you can like pad it out with these other things, like play around and be a lot more experimental. And that definitely helped shape the sound of Sisters.
There's some really cool synth stuff on that as well as everything else.
Yeah, again, like we hadn't really like played with that before we went into record. We kind of had like the song structures, but then just like having these things on hand in the studio and someone willing to show you how to use them instead really helps.
So nice to have someone who's not like kind of turning their back and doing their secret producer thing, but not letting you see. Yeah,
we're definitely grateful to Margot for kind of like opening those doors. And always, again, like she's been trying to show us how to use like drum sequences and things like that. Again, it's like just meant that there's more possibilities with the way we're writing our songs.
From everything I've read about Big Joanie, the band was formed with a very specific mission in mind. And of course you joined 4 years later. I'm trying to add up. 2013, that is when it started. You joined in 2017. What attracted you to join them?
I think just being a fan, actually. So like I'd heard of them when I was living in York, I always think it's really funny because I heard of them through this music blog that Steph used to write, and she was always like, I thought no one read that blog. And apparently I was like sat in York like, who's this like black punk girl in London? Like, oh my gosh. And so I think I'd like heard about Big Joanie through that, and I thought that sounded really cool, like right up my street, like black feminist punk band. And then when I moved back, I was still playing with Junk, and I saw that Big Joanie were playing some gig in like, what was it? I think Fiddler's Elbow, and the promoter was kind of like explicitly saying like, I'm putting on a gig with like feminist bands, and so I'd just emailed them and been like, can my bands like play this gig? We sound like this. I think we'd fit. And they were like, yeah, like go on then. So like I just got on the bill with them. So I was like, oh great, I can finally see this band, and so yeah, really excited to see them. I think they were headlining, and then after that, like, I would kind of either just see them at shows I was already playing or already going to or whatever, because we were in the same scene anyway. And then there was like one instance when I think Shadeen couldn't make a show at Leeds Queer Fest and Junk were already playing. So I was already like in York that weekend. So I'd like filled in for her in the Big Joanie set.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, I kind of learned a couple of the songs that way through trying to learn her drum bits. And it's really hard to play drums standing up, I will just say. Extremely tiring. So again, anyone who thinks it's like an easy way out, it is absolutely not.
You still got to hit things, haven't you?
It was really, really hard, and I was really sweaty by the end of it. So yeah, like when Kira, the first bassist, had obviously said she was moving, and then they approached me to see if I'd like to play bass for them, because I was already playing bass in Witching Waves, so see me play bass and I could do it or whatever. So yeah, that's how I ended up joining the band. Great. So again, like I guess kind of like muscled my own way in, but like I do say just like hang around. It's like I just hang around with bands I like, and then eventually like go off.
So if they don't invite you, you just invite yourself in. I like that.
Yeah, like you see me all the time, so come on. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's the way. Yeah. Can I join your band? You see me all the time.
Yeah.
Love it. I just love it. I think it's brilliant. I think all the things you're doing, I think it's really brilliant. I love it when bands actually stand for something, because I just think that must make it easier. I mean, I stand for things too, and so it makes it easier if requests come in or people offer you things to do. It's easier to go, yes, that fits with what I do, or no, that doesn't. Do you find that as well, especially with Big Joanie?
Yeah, definitely. Like, and obviously we always have like a discussion beforehand, but more or less we're usually on the same page because we share like the same values kind of thing. We can listen when someone could explain like why they would want to pursue something or why they would feel uncomfortable. So yeah, it's definitely been really helpful. And I think it's always seems strange to me when you hear like about like really like deep like band conflicts and stuff, because I'm like, oh, my band's like really like each other. Like, you know, we respect each other and value each other's opinions, and I can't imagine being in a band where that wasn't happening. So but yeah, like every band I've been in, like or that I've joined that I haven't been a part of starting, we've shared the same values, more or less. Like I guess like with Charmpit, like me and Rihanna and Anne-Marie would describe themselves as like anarchists, and have taught me a lot about like or like show me like lots of different anarchist texts, like things that I wasn't aware of, or like I probably didn't have as full an understanding of what anarchism means before meeting them. So that's been interesting, but like fundamentally we still share like the same politics, even if I haven't like declared myself an out and out like anarchist yet. Then Anne-Marie's still hoping that'll happen.
She's trying to convert you.
We'll see.
Brilliant. And I noticed also that you supported Sad 13 a few years ago, which is cool because your episode's coming after Sadie's episode of this podcast.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Legend. That was really exciting as well, because again, like I was already a big fan of like Speedy or Tears and stuff. So yeah, I remember when we got the email like that we'd been asked, I was like, oh my god, like Sadie from Studio Tiz wants us to support them. Like, I love her band.
Yeah.
So like really, really excited. And I remember for that tour, her band was made up of like UK musicians. So she had like Simone from the Go Team, like one of we usually have 2 drummers. She also had, is it Leah, who I think was playing in Alimony Hustle, and our friend Kai, who's played in a ton of bands. I think she plays in Necra at the moment, and Child's Pose.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember because like it was one of our first like support tour. But like obviously you don't get that much money on those tours and stuff, and we couldn't have afforded to get like a van with the fee we were going to get or anything. And I think we just didn't have our own backline because that just like wasn't a thing that we had, and we'd never really needed it. And I remember like her people were like quite, as in like whoever the booking agent or was or whatever, not her, was like quite like, oh well, like you won't be able to like borrow anything or like travel with them or anything. But when it actually came to it, like she's obviously like so nice and supportive. Like she was not bothered at all if we used like her backline. And also because the van hire company had like messed up, they ended up getting like a massive van that could have seated like 9 people. There was like a mini fridge in it. So it was like, I think we'd actually, by the time it came around, we'd booked some of our train tickets, but she was happy for us to also travel in the van with them, and it's convenient, and was really keen to get to know us and chat with us. And she said she'd like requested we be asked to support and stuff.
Oh, brilliant.
And then since then she's always been really supportive of the band. She let me stay at her house once when I was it's like really, it's just always been like a really big supporter. So yeah, like that tour, like I think again like taught us a lot as well. Like one of our first instances of touring, we were like, oh, like maybe we'll need like backline, or this is what a budget might look like, and what a good tour route might look like and stuff.
Yeah, we learn by doing, don't we?
Yeah.
And as soon as you add drums into any situation, you've got to get a van. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, my God, yeah. Oh, well, even the stands are heavy. Like, there's just so much stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of lifting. Well, mostly that's what Sadie and I talked about.
Yeah, I'm just like, well, why are they still so heavy? Because I really love that the Fender bass amp, like the Rumble 500 or whatever, it's like a really light combo amp. And I first used one in Bristol, actually, I think at Roll for the Soul.
Yeah.
And I was like, so if amps can be this light, why aren't they?
Yeah.
Because it seems like really practical.
Yeah.
And it sounded really good. And it was like, I could very easily just like pop this in a van at the end of the night.
Yeah. I have a Fender Rumble cab, and I bought it because I had this insanely heavy, I'm not going to mention the make because I'm not anti the make of the thing, but all other bass cabs are really, really heavy. So if you don't know, people who are listening, the cab is the speaker. It has to be heavy-ish because it's got to have some cones inside and things to make it sound good. Yeah, that's what you plug the bit in that you plug your bass into so that it sounds good. But it really doesn't have to because, these rumbles are amazing. Well done, Fender. Yeah. And they're really light. And I basically swapped it for this ridiculously heavy thing. And this guy came to buy it off me, off Gumtree or something. I didn't want to tell him it was super heavy because I didn't want him to not buy it, right? Because he'd agreed to buy it already. But I did say, oh, let me help you to the car with it. And he's like, oh, no, it's all right. I've got it. And I was thinking, you don't know. You're just going to carry it because you don't want me, a woman, to help you carry something to your car because you want to show how strong you are. But I know how heavy that is. So I just watched him from the door. I was like, waving, bye, enjoy the amp. It was so heavy.
Like, honestly.
Oh my God. And the handles almost cut your hands. Like it was just really uncomfortable handles. You don't need uncomfortable handles.
Yeah.
Even men don't want to hurt their hands when they lift an amp, do they?
Bad, design. Yeah, honestly. Yeah, it's the worst part of touring, the loading in and loading out. Put wheels and everything as well. Wheels. Yes, wheels. Wheels and nice handles. Anyway, which 3 pieces of your own work would you recommend as a gateway for new listeners? Big Joanie have been playing a cover of Solange's Cranes in the Sky since at least last year. It's just a song we all really love. Steph is a huge Solange fan, and she's written actually written a book called Why Slange Matters that'll be out next year.
Wow.
And it's part of a series that the University of Texas Press does on various musicians. So it'll be like why so-and-so matters. So this time it's Solange.
Great.
And we try to like Big Joanie fire. So like didn't just want to do a straight cover, kind of played it in our style.
It's really brooding. It's excellent. Yeah, really good.
So yeah, that's probably like the first thing you'll hear that's new until we get to finishing off the new album. I'd say it's a good introduction to us as well if you've never heard of us before. And then it's kind of a nice gateway between like where we were going with Sisters, our first album, into like what the second album might sound like, which we think will be a bit more ambitious.
Yeah.
And then the second piece I'd recommend is by my other band, Charmpit, and it would be our album Cause a Stir. So that actually came out in April this year, which is obviously like we'd kind of just gone into lockdown and we had like a big tour cancelled. We're going to do a UK tour and also support Diet Sig for a couple of UK dates, and that was all cancelled. And the Diet Sig dates have been rescheduled for November, but I'm not 100% if that's definitely going to go ahead.
Yeah.
That's the first Charmpit album, and it's the first recording I've done with them. And I think it really gives like a story of what the band is about. It's like some bits are like sort of serious, some bits are playful. Definitely explains a lot of Rin and Marie's politics, I think. And also it is like a lot of it is about like fun as well and friendships. And exploring relationships that aren't just like your like partner or whoever. It is definitely a lot about like platonic friendships as well. So that was really fun, and it's very much like a poppy punk album. And like I said, it's my first time playing lead guitar, so that was really fun to do. And then the last thing I'd recommend is on my SoundCloud. That's where I've put sort of the solo stuff that I've worked on in lockdown.
Yeah.
So I put that song that was from that competition, and the first song that I did for the art show is on there. So if anyone wants to hear some of my solo bits, I'll probably end up putting some more on there as well. And that's just soundcloud.com/Estella-Adeyeri, and Big Joanie and Charmpit are all over like Spotify and Bandcamp.
I'll put a load of links in the thing. I didn't know my dog was in here till just now, because I could hear him. I could hear him sighing. He sighs a lot. He's constantly judging me. But I thought he was outside the door. And then because just to explain to people who are listening, we're doing this by a video chat because it's nicer, because we've never met before. I always think it's nicer to do that. And then I just saw this thing out like behind me, and it's like, what's in my room? It's my dog.
I had seen like just little feet pop out of the bottom of the screen. It was so cute.
Right. Funny dog. He's 13 soon. Bless him. So that was a bit scary. So I tried to hold it together while you were telling me about your bands then. But now I understand what's happened in my own home, which is good. I was on the reverse, like, am I okay to mention this dog? Because he looks super cute. I should probably finish the Laura doesn't seem aware that there's a dog in her room. Come here, I'll lift him up so you can see him. Come here. Finally, he gets to be on the podcast. Yay! He doesn't really see screens. He's never like noticed the TV or anything, but he can sit with me for a minute.
To have that life.
I know, right? Well, yes. See, one of the questions I would also love to ask you is, how do you feel about the internet and smartphones? Like, is it something that you find to be a positive influence in your life? Especially in relation to music, I guess.
Yeah, I guess like positive. I probably use them a little bit too much, so that's my only hesitancy. But like again, I'd say for me it's been like almost a lifeline, not to be that cliched, but in lockdown, like for staying in communication, for discovering new music, for being able to still make music, it's just been like invaluable. Like, and obviously like making little voice notes on your phone or voice memos with things where you're like, oh, that could be cool in a song, let me record that so I don't forget it. Like, that's just so useful for me. I guess I've had it for so long, I now don't really like know what it would be like not having those tools, or not just being able to record a song at home, however imperfect I might consider it. And like just being able to do that is so like freeing.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's just great to be able to make a demo at home, or like I said with Decolonized Fest, interact with bands from across the world and stay in communication. And like I get a kind of love-hate with social media. Like sometimes, you know, I'll be really into like using it and stuff, and like, oh, what's going on Twitter today? Like, spam those tweets out, and then I'm like, no, like this is too much, like, and I've got too many messages, like, and I'm tapping out, like,
too popular.
But yeah, I can't cope. But like, again, like for being able, when you like can't play on stage and have that usual communication that we would have with people who listen to us or like see our friends or at gigs and stuff, it's been nice to still have people, still be able to chat to people on like Facebook and Instagram, or people like give their feedback to this new single and stuff like that. And yeah, that's just been really nice. And yeah, it's always weird because like obviously like to think of people you don't know caring about your music when they absolutely don't have to. It's always like, yes, you can't take that for granted, really.
No,
so it's always really good from those people.
Yeah. Which 3 other artists should we all be listening to?
No Home, who just released their debut album, which is called Fucking Hell, which is like a great album title. So yeah, already like bold, straight out the gate. Yeah, just like, I feel like we've been waiting a long time for this piece of music to come out, and it still like exceeded my expectations, because then Charlie's played with us a bunch of times and supported Big Joanie, or they've played at Decolonized Fest, and we've been a big fan. And I've had like one of their earlier EPs. But yeah, there were a couple of songs that I'd heard live, but hearing them on the record, like they really like come to life, or they just sound so great. And yeah, it's so like experimental, but also like it feels like really like on the nose for the time. Like she can really just like pinpoint a certain feeling of like what it is like for them being a young graduate in London, coming into this environment where like, oh, you've got this degree, but that does not mean at all that you're going to be living comfortably, even though that's why I told you to go to uni. So like, so that's the first. And then the second is Screaming Toenail, who are a queer decolonial punk bands who again like been playing with Big Joanie for a long time. Really awesome live, like South London punk band. And again, like I've been waiting for the album because I knew they'd been making it for a while. They made it with Margot, who produced our album, and I know she really enjoyed working on it with them as well. And like it's just like hearing these songs that I've really liked live, and finally like being on like a record and stuff is really exciting, and it's nice to be able to support them in that way. And I think I wrote down one of my favorites. So like on Charlie's, I really like A B- in This Economy, and on the Screaming Toenail album, which is called Growth, I really liked Swarm or Get Cute are my favorite live songs. So I'm looking forward to when
all these names are great.
Yeah. So good. I love Get Cute because Jacob has this lyric where it's like, oh, you're like a little old lady shoplifting from Boots, stealing blue lipstick so she can stay cute.
That's wonderful.
So, and yeah, like live, they're so like playful and joyous, and like, yeah, just amazing, and like, yeah, awesome punk band. And then the last one, who were from the US, who I discovered online and through like, you know, just, yeah, like I said, being able to connect and stuff online. There's a band called Meet Me at the Altar, who are like a POC punk band from the States. Again, I think either all women or non-binary members. I think I discovered them because I was just being nosy and I wanted to see like what like were listed as like similar artists to Big Joanie, because like sometimes I'm like that makes sense, and sometimes I'm like, not really.
I was
like, oh, this like it listed this band, so I was like, oh, they look cool, I haven't seen them before. And like I listened and I loved it. It was like really, for me, it's quite nostalgic. It does remind me of that kind of early Fueled by Ramen, like Paramore era of like pop punk, and done really well. So I think I'm quite picky with my pop punk. Like, not all of it is that great, but it's like, oh, like if I was just like, yeah, why haven't there just been these POC women making like pop punk bangers? Because like they had this EP called Bigger Than Me, and it's so catchy and like hook laden, and it just does that genre so well. And I'm just like, oh, like, yeah, they deserve to be like massive, and I've seen them getting a lot of support over this lockdown period as well, which is really cool. So
great.
I'm hoping they can eventually come to like the UK, but that they do make me feel like a real throwback to kind of like the pop punk and emo that I used to like, but still refreshing and modern for this time. So yeah,
it sounds great. There's so much great music about, and I think most of it isn't on the billboards that we see, and so it's great to hear about 3 brand new to me bands. I'm going to be checking them out straight away. Thank you. What's your next creative adventure?
So Big Joanie have a social distance gig coming up. So yeah, so excited about that. It's our first time trialing this. There's a lot of precautions in place in terms of like numbers, and everybody has to mask up. Distancing will have to be adhered to and stuff, and there's going to be a lot of like sanitizer available, and just like trying to make sure that it's done as safely as possible.
Is it an outside gig or an indoor one?
It's outside, yeah. So it's going to be like in a courtyard of like in-state Newington, which is another leafy area.
Yes.
So yeah, really lucky to be able to try this and to have people like willing to come as well, because like it's still like a very uncertain time. So we just hope like, yeah, it can bring people some like joy and like, again, not to sound cliche, but like it's just been, I feel like if you're used to the whole like social aspect of being in shows, like not to discount like just missing out on socializing generally, but like it does really feel like in London especially, like there's just like a community within like gigs and stuff. Like when we played Moth Club at the start of the year, that really felt like our people at that show. Like everyone was so sound and really happy, and it was like a really positive vibe, and people had like, if they'd gone with their friends or they'd gone on their own and stuff, but like a lot of the feedback we got was about like the atmosphere and like people feeling good and welcome, which is what we always want to create. Yeah, like I said, I always meet such like nice or like cool people when Big Joanie play shows, and people take the time to chat to us after. So I've really missed that. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to like being back on a stage and at least having some like interaction in that way. And we get to share this it's to launch the single, The Cranes in the Sky cover. We're going to have some signed copies, and yeah, like it'll just be nice to do something like that when it's been so long without it. When I used to do it, like it felt every week.
Well, I think it's a testament to a band and the way they carry themselves and the way that they show their values through what they do and the music they make, when the audience completely aligns with that. I just think it shows you're doing exactly what you want, and people are responding to it in the way that they should be, which is to support it and enjoy it. So well done, because that's not easy, really not easy. Especially when we all, with everything else to balance in life and playing in a bajillion bands and all the things that you do. So it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming and being on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yay. Thanks so much to Estella for being on the show. Get hold of Big Joanie's new 7-inch by heading to my deluxe show notes page and clicking on the handy link. I've gathered all of Estella's music recommendations there as well, and she wrote you a note. Just go to penfriend.rocks/Estella for that. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please subscribe. You are so important, and your help in getting this podcast into the ears of more great people just like you would be very much appreciated. Please join me next week for my conversation with Nova Twins. It's another gem. Till then...